Okay, so hi everyone. Thanks so much for coming out to this first of hopefully many events hosted by the Institute for Religion, Culture, and Societal Futures here at St. Jerome's and the University of Waterloo. We're really excited for our talk today and the speaker, Géraldine Mossière from the University de Montréal. We're having a few technical difficulties just before we started recording, but thankfully everything seems to have been smoothed out. So we only have, a little under an hour, so I don't want to take too much time. I'm going to properly introduce Géraldine, and then I will turn it over to her. So Géraldine is an associate professor at the Institute of Religious Studies at the Université de Montréal. Between 2019 and 2020, she held a chair in transregional studies at the Institute of Advanced Studies in Marseille. Her research focuses on religious subjectivity and behavior, tends to approach it from an ethnographic perspective. She also looks at questions related to spirituality and the relationship between spirituality and health in contemporary society. She's going to be presenting, I think, on her newest book, which has been published by Presse de l'Université Laval. So the title is actually French, Portrait de la modernité non religieuse, quelques confidences de baby boomers au Québec, or otherwise translated as Dynamics of Non-Religious Modernity, Dispatches from Baby Boomers in Quebec. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Géraldine.
Thank you very much, Galen. Thank you, Sarah, for inviting me to present my book, which is written in French, but my presentation will obviously be in English. Actually, talking about religion in Quebec is a sensitive, if not explosive, subject. There is in Quebec this shared collective discourse that is really centered on the rejection of religion. And there is this stereotype that says that actually religion is something for immigrants. And we, Franco-Quebecois, we are atheist, or maybe spiritual, but not religious at all. So there is this shared collective discourse. And I also want to emphasize before really diving into the topic, that in this presentation, the term Québécois refers to people who have lived in the province of Quebec for at least 2 generations and who have Franco-Catholic backgrounds. So it excludes recent immigrants who have been in Quebec for less than 2 generations. So actually, the reality is not as clear-cut as the stereotypes said. In 2021, only 27% of Quebecois reported being non-religious, which is an increase, of course, from 2011, but still a very low, a quite low figure. Also, there are a lot of critics of religious institutions and authorities that are really pervasive, but there is still 54% of the population who identify as Catholic. Mind-body practices and self-help movements are increasingly successful. Also, Asian spiritualities and indigenous worldviews are attracting more and more Quebecois. For example, I'm doing actually currently fieldwork among neo-shamanic groups that are really thriving, for the moment. And Catholic practices dramatically declined, of course, but Catholic memory, attachment to Catholic heritage and Catholic sensitivity are very alive. And I put a picture of the Saint Frère André, who is one of the 2 Québécois saints, who is the subject of a lot of devotion at the Oratoire Saint-Joseph in Montreal. So ethnographic observations show that Québécois are curious and exploring new expressions of religious diversity in Quebec, sometimes through conversions or through borrowing from other religious traditions. There is a strong desire among this population to discard Catholic institutions, but on the other hand, there is an affective relationship to Catholicism as part of the collective historical memory. So here maybe I will do a brief historical overview to explain this very strange religious landscape. So the secularization occurred quite late in Quebec, actually at the end of the 60s, in the wake of what we call the Quiet Revolution. So this process was coupled with the process of modernization, with the demise of the conservative Duplessis government in the 60s or in the end of 50s, and the Lesage liberal government's rise to power. So Quebec's modernity, which is quite recent, was built around a collective myth of the Grande Noirceur, which refers to a period of when the province was dominated by the Catholic Church, who worked in collaboration with the conservative regime, and both are said to have maintained the province in a state of backwardness. From which the province emerged with the Quiet Revolution, which also meant taking distance from the Catholic Church. So this, of course, occurred in a larger context of cultural diversification of the Canadian society. So this political wind of change resulted in social and cultural transformation that affected very deeply the province, with, for example, social liberalization, especially affecting family models with high levels of cohabitation, single-parent families, children born out of wedlock, as well as a big sexual deregulation, women's emancipation, also a cultural change with the hippie movement coming to the province. And I just quoted the manifeste du Refus Global, which was a movement of cultural protest that occurred also in the same movement on 60s, and a big opening of the province to the world with 1967 World's Fair and the 1976 Olympic Games in Montreal, which really opened the province to the whole world. So this happened in parallel with the rejection of the Catholic Church and the high criticism regarding the clergy's authority, as of course, as we all know, Catholic Church was experiencing herself a process of internal secularization with Vatican II. So how have these recent changes in Quebec impacted the local religious landscape? So it seemed to me that the best way to address this question was to focus on the generation of baby boomers. Why? So the baby boomers in Quebec is the generation that is born between 1945 and 1957. And I state that this generation embodied this process of secularization and big, deep social, cultural transformation in the province. This generation was raised in ultramontane Catholicism. But they also experienced the Quiet Revolution, as well as the modernization and liberalization of Quebec, and the cultural and religious diversification of the province, as well as its associated political debates regarding especially the whole identity of the province. So this generation is usually considered as the architect, but not the promoters of the modernization of Quebec, meaning that most of them say that even the parents, they were already questioning the authority of the clergy, but it's really the baby boomers that put all this criticism in action. So in one way, we could say that this generation and their own biographies attest to the transformation of the Quebecois society. So studying this generation can help us understand the current paradoxes of the Quebecois religious landscape that I have stated before. And I decided to study these paradoxes through a qualitative research with the following questions. What are the religious experiences of Quebecois baby boomers? How do their beliefs and practices relate to their personal biographies, life cycle stages, and experiences of modernity? And do these trajectories reflect the collective debates that have permeated Quebec society in recent decades? So, yeah. So my team and I did an ethnographic project basically focused on interviews with 43 participants whom we tried to interview twice. Actually, only a bit more than half of the respondents could be interviewed twice because the rest was not available. Still, it's quite a low number. It's not as low for a qualitative research project, but still we could have some variety in among this data in terms of age of the person, gender. We nearly have half of respondents, half male, half female, place of residence, Montreal or the rest of Quebec, rural, urban dynamics, so we have both. Also variety in terms of education and employment, in terms of socioeconomic economic background and marital status. So what is really interesting is to check their the identity, the religious identity that they declared. Some of them declared to be atheist, agnostic. One was converted to Islam, and some also declared to be non-affiliated. But still, most of them, 32, said they were Catholic. But if we dig a little bit more what it means to be Catholic for these persons, some said they're non-believing, non-practicing, but still Catholic. Some reverted to Catholicism after having taken distance. Some, just one said they were believer. And others said we are believer and practitioner. Some said we are occasional part-time practitioner, or minimal in the private sphere practitioner, believing with personal practice. Some said it's Catholicism with bricolage. Some said we are Catholic by default because actually we don't know which what to score. And some said we are practitioner, but actually not believer. And I will come back to this category, which is really, really interesting. So the book that I'm presenting today is structured around, of course, this research. First, I do a little bit of contextualization about this very specific modernization and liberalization process of Quebec in the 60s and the 70s, because it's quite particular in the secular societies that if you compare to France, for example, where secularization process occurred very long ago, started very long ago. In Quebec, it's just a few decades ago. And then I described the life story approach that we adopted in the research. I describe how I built different profiles based on the individual narratives that we collected. And there are 6 chapters that are devoted to present 6 different profiles that emerged from the 43 respondents. So I want to emphasize that this book is really meant to reach a large public. My intention when I was writing this book is that baby boomers read the book and identify and to one of the chapter, one of the profile that I describe. So of course there is conceptualization, and I have to say that this research is based on a lived religion approach, which focuses on the everyday interpretative and pragmatic dimension of the religion, as opposed to institutionalized forms of religion, and with emphasis on human creativity and adaptability. The interviews were based on a life story approach, which means that respondents were asked to describe their life trajectory, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, as well as their religious upbringing or lack of it, with biographical milestones and turning points, illness, divorce, bereavement, and the various stages of the life cycle, meaning family life, marriage, birth of children, etc. And for all these different periods of their life, we asked them to identify the specific rituals, religious practices, beliefs, or religious group attendance that accompanied these experiences. And those practices were set against the social events that were undergoing at the time in Quebec, like the Quiet Revolution, the changes in the social mores and family practices, the counterculture of the 70s, the debates on the reasonable accommodation, or the presence of religious minorities. So analysis focused on narrative identity theory from Ricoeur, according to which subjects can build their identity through narratives in which they elaborate stories that articulate various disparate elements of their life experiences, events, action, and intentions around a plot. And the hypothesis is that in societies like in Quebec, where traditional institutions have lost the legitimacy to produce and transmit common and shared references, these individual narratives could actually constitute religious regimes, new religious regimes, that is, maybe new collective narratives, such as the common narrative in Quebec, according to which we are maybe spiritual but not religious. This is a very big narrative in Quebec. So maybe my intention was to seek, are there other narratives that we can identify among this generation that could become maybe larger narratives to characterize a Quebecois religious landscape. So the methodology allows to grasp respondents' life course, that is the way life experiences unfold from birth to death, by articulating together different dimensions of life and taking into account the social interactions as well as political forces and historical conditions. This project is meant to explore how beliefs and practices are mobilized at key moments in the life course of the people, and how certain spiritual experience can also drastically alter its direction. So there is really this life course paradigm that is at the basis of the research. So typically, we can say that the life course of a Quebecois baby boomer who has experienced Catholic socialization might include a period of atheism in adolescence, followed by an adhesion to Hindu principles of life as a young adult in the counterculture period, then a return to a form of agnosticism or religious indifference with a arrival on the job market, with Catholic rituals at the time of marriage or the birth of children, charismatic healing practices in the event of illness, or recourse to meditation or personal development techniques in the middle age, and finally a return to Catholic heritage in old age. That would be a typical life course that we could identify among the respondents. But actually, the 6 profiles that I present in the book show the complexity and the diversity of this typical life course. So the data revealed several converging narratives, which I see as configurations that correspond to major trends in the contemporary Quebecois religious landscapes among Quebecois baby boomers, I have to emphasize, of course. So, so there are those 6 profiles that I'm gonna describe a little bit. So we have the non-practicing believers who have a faith but they not practice in this faith. We also have the non-believer practitioners who have a sensitivity to Catholic aesthetic and material heritage. We also have the spiritual but not religious, of course. I was expecting that, who actually are adepts of do-it-yourself or esoteric practices linked to reappropriation of Eastern spiritualities or associated with the First Nations spiritualities. We also have a very few reconverts who rediscovered their Catholic identity after exploring other religious resources. But when they come back to their religious Catholic identity, they unfold it in very different ways as the way they have been socialized in. We also, of course, have agnostic and humanist people who are in doubt, who are prone to doubt, and focus rather on ethical values rather than religious practices or beliefs. And finally, rational atheists or disenchanted people who have traded religion for science or any other paradigm, including the nationalist repertoire. So those are big trends in the data, but I have also, of course, to emphasize that the people that we met, their itinerary, the path are very individualized and singular, and none of our respondents can be reduced to one of those 6 profiles. Actually, those 6 profiles, the respondents could overlap 2 of those 6 six profiles, and those six profiles are not exclusive, but they are major trends that emerge from the data. And there are, of course, factors of variation inside of those different profiles. And these profiles are not stable universes of meaning. They have contradictions, ambivalences within the profiles. I will explain a bit later. And for example, some people who state from the outset that they are atheist, when we dig a little bit more, we see in their past that they actually have some beliefs of different kinds, like the existence of energy, or they value nature, or they feel the presence of their ancestors. So those universes of meaning are not stable. What we can say still that there are key trends transversal to those six profiles is that most of the respondents have a critical look at religions. For example, pointing out the inconsistencies and dissonances between the beliefs promoted by religious institutions and the practices of leaders and followers. And most of them prefer the embodiment of beliefs and values rather than the transmission of dogma. This is very important in all the narratives. We also saw the omnipresence of the theme of healing and the diversity of discourses on Catholicism. Catholic as a memory, as an identity, as a material heritage, or as a broad and solid identity basis from which they can develop a wide variety of beliefs and backgrounds. A lot of them say, well, Catholicism actually equipped me to be open to diversity, to be curious. So that was very interesting to check. So each of these profiles illustrates still a specific and original trend in the reconfiguration of religion in the context of Quebec modernity. And their characteristics form what we could call a family of similarities. In the book, I described those six profiles on the basis. I recomposed each profile from the life story of the persons who correspond to this profile, and I built a life story. So actually, none of the respondent is exactly one of those profiles. But we can say that it's family resemblance, and some people out of the 43 persons would correspond to one profile more than the other. So I would like to exemplify how one of the profiles that I identify and which I find really, really interesting. It's the profile of what I call the practitioner, the non-believer practitioners. So I'm going to describe the path of Jean. Jean, who was born into a well-to-do family in Montreal in the 40s, and he grew up in a fairly homogeneous social setting animated by parish life and the Catholic liturgical calendar. During his university years, he discovered a different way of approaching and living a religion that was, I quote, less moralizing and more fulfilling, guided by enlightened chaplains, mainly Dominicans, themselves inspired by the renewal instilled by the Vatican II Council. As a history teacher, he spent a few years in North Africa, where contact with another religion, coupled with the discovery of a French colonial structure disconnected from the local landscape, instilled in him a Cartesian doubt that would never leave him. This led him to distance himself from both dogma and the Catholic institution. So Jean distanced himself both from the Catholic Church, whose wait-and-see attitude and lack of foresight, quote, he criticizes in relation to the major issues of his time, and from faith in God. All the while remaining fascinated by the idea of believing. He said, I quote, I envy those for whom there is a connection with faith or with the afterlife or belief, but for me, it doesn't exist. So faith seems all the more desirable to him as he feels he's getting aged and he wishes for the comfort of faith. Yet his waning faith did not leave him empty-handed. Jean still had a strong religious sensibility. He says, I have a very deep religious feeling. I continue to be moved by religious ceremonies, to love Gregorian chant, to visit monks and take part in their services. In fact, Jean is very fond of religious rites, and he appreciates both the aesthetics and the meaning and memory they convey. Jean sees religious rituals as practices that are fundamental to human beings and essential to their equilibrium, whatever their religion or spirituality. I quote, meditating, pausing, reflecting, thinking, being silent, going towards the essential things and everything. In the end, our life is full of artificial, superficial, useless, and other things. He regularly visits monasteries where he appreciates monks' lifestyles, who, I quote, cultivate the land, raise animals, and pray. He compares this religious feeling to an artistic process. He says, when I took painting lessons, I thought it was wonderful because for an hour I was doing something and that was all I was doing. It gave me pleasure and I was in a kind of trance. It was very satisfying to do something that I could consider beautiful. So Jean situates these religious manifestations among the beautiful things, well, religious manifestations, among the beautiful things that humanity has done. That's what he says. Not without pointing out that, quote, of course, religion has done a lot of harm too, a lot of intolerance, a lot of wars, a lot of suffering. Jean sees religious practice as the privileged channel that man has developed to, I quote, rise above material contingencies and achieve a certain detachment, values, reflection, meditation that makes man superior to the beast. It's the desire to touch on man's ability to transcend his material concerns and survival needs through poetry and song that leads Jean and his wife to sporadically attend masses, especially midnight masses for Christmas in ethnic parishes in Montreal, where they seek out the fervor, rhythms, and expressiveness of the celebrations. On a visit to Africa, he and his wife marveled at the beauty of the ceremonies of a Benedictine abbey in Swahili, to which they added their own voices. For Jean, however, the beauty of these prayer experiences lies in the strength of the collective, in the manner of a musical concert, where the performance of the whole relies on the contribution of each individual. I quote, it's like playing in an orchestra, in chamber music, for example. You play an instrument, but you play your instrument with other people. It's not the same as playing an instrument alone. For Jean, Quebec's collective history is intrinsically related to its religious heritage, and he considered the Charter of Values proposed by the Parti Québécois in 2013 to be legitimate insofar as it would have protected the common material and imagined heritage on which Quebec is founded. If his position is compatible with the idea of secularism or laicity, it's because Jean dissociates the identity dimension of the Catholic religion from its political role. In his view, the crucifix overhanging the hemicycle of the National Assembly should disappear, and actually it disappeared. But the cross perched atop the Montreal in Montreal should be maintained. Jean distinguishes these cultural artifacts from religious behaviors, such as the veil worn by some Muslim women, a practice he considers retrograde by virtue of an evolutionary discourse according to which the culmination of the religious is found in interiority and reflexivity. Jean distinguishes between dogma and religious culture, which Québécois are said to have discarded too quickly. He says, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because, he says, within our societies, we owe some very fine things to religion. Among the considerable contributions of religious institutions to our collective history, Jean names education, the hospital system, charitable institutions, but also the richness of Catholic culture and the opportunities for spiritual religious experience it offers. So this is a very unexpected category of non-believing practitioners. I mean, people who dissociate the references of their beliefs from those of their practices and draw their religious path on their aesthetic sensibilities to Catholic materialities. Their value and are touched by religious material heritage as well as by the symbolic significance of the rituals they interpret. Here, religious belief and affiliation are reformulated in the light of the sensory experience and the materiality of practices. The strong sensitivity of this type of non-believing practitioners to the material culture of Catholic churches and the aesthetics of Catholic liturgy is essentially based on their subjective resonance with their socialization experience in pre-conciliar Catholicism, itself strongly focused on the high level of ritualization of the Catholic faith. In this scheme, people like Jean select and activate material elements linked to Catholic rituality that remind them of childhood memories as well as their religious upbringing that once shaped their affects, as well as their emotional and subjective dispositions. This lived religiosity is rooted in an emotional dimension of religiosity that also maintains doubt and ambivalence regarding religion, as well as a specific and exotizing relationship to the ethnic other, seen as a strong believer. So the other is a strong believer. We are just sensitive. In a word, it could be said that such sensibilities manifest some identities that draw on religious emotion as a memory. But this sensitivity to Catholic heritage also invites people like Jean to question the limits of the emancipation from Catholic Church. Actually, baby boomers who share Jean's profile value Catholic legacy for its contribution to the constitution and functioning of modern Quebecois society. So this profile invites to nuance the common idea that the collective representations of Quebecois, especially baby boomers, are dissociated from the Catholic symbolic universe. In fact, for people like Jean, the Catholic resource remains a significant part of the common heritage, as well as an element of collective cultural experience. And we can talk during the Q&A period about this very strong ambivalence of Quebecois baby boomers toward Catholicism, with this very a deep affective relationship to Catholicism, but at the same time a very high level of criticism, which I call a love and hate relationship in some ways. So we won't have time to talk about another profile, the profile of Jean, who's an atheist, who says he doesn't believe, but actually I like to say he believes he doesn't believe, because when I dig into his life path and life story, we can see that there are a lot of things he believes in, like nature, like the Quebecois sovereignty and nationalism, and of course a very strong trope in Quebec, which is the gender equity. So as a conclusion, I would say that in this book, I try to explore one facet of the modernization of secular society with Catholic heritage. I think Quebec is a very interesting case in this setting, and I also think this book shows how studying religion through a generational focus can be very fruitful. Here, generation is understood in the with the definition of Mannheim. I mean, people who share a social historical experience. And if we explored the relationship to religion for the millennials, for example, we would of course find a very different landscape. And I also want to emphasize the benefits of life story analysis when it comes to grasping the complexity of religious paths and behaviors, especially considering that the relationship to religion and religious resources evolved according to life cycle experiences. And this is what I really wanted to show in this book. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Géraldine. Really wonderful presentation. And now we have some time to ask Géraldine any questions that arose during her talk. It looks like Sarah, did you want to handle the questions in the chat?
Yeah, I'll let you know. There's actually one that just appeared from David Eagle. You want to start with that one?
Yeah, let's do that. Do you want to read it out?
David, do you want to jump in or you want me to read it?
I think I can jump in. So, Géraldine, really wonderful talk. Enjoyed it a lot. You began your talk with saying there was a sort of paradox that you observed in religious engagement in Quebec, that that there are evidence of secularization, but then there's, of course, persistence of religion as well. listening to your talk, it really struck me that I didn't really see a paradox here. It felt to me very much like what you observed was what I would expect under secularization, that, there's this decline in a dominant set of religious beliefs and practices, and their replacement really with a heterogeneous and, what seems to be a really shifting set of meaning-making practices and beliefs. And that really, what you described to me, it really struck me that most of the orientation, at least towards religious practices and beliefs, really seem to be humanistic and sort of materialistic and sort of culturally oriented, but not really oriented to the divine. I wonder if you agree with this. Sort of, is the paradigm of secularization adequate or helpful to describe what you observed among your participants? Or do we need a different paradigm to describe what religion amongst this group of Quebecois looks like in contemporary Canada? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I didn't express myself correctly. For me, the paradox is not that Quebecois is a very secularized society, yet there are people who are very attached to some Catholic heritage. To me, the paradox is this common narrative that says, we Quebecois, we have rejected religion, and religion is the issue or is the matter of immigrants. We are not into that at all. And at the same time, in the statistics, the majority of them say they are Catholic, and it's not the millennials who say they are Catholics, it's more the baby boomers, actually. So that's the paradox, but it's not, of course, it's not a paradox to be in a secular society and still to have persons who have religious sensitivity or practices or beliefs. So that's not a paradox to me. Is the secularization paradigm accurate to describe Quebecois situation? This is a huge question. It depends on the level of the society. I would say maybe we have to distinguish the micro level from the macro and even the public institution. Well, obviously that in Quebec, we talk more and more about laicity, more than about secularization. And there is, of course, this strong will to really relegate religion into the private sphere. I'm not sure if the secularization paradigm can really is really accurate to describe this very strong political will to make religion only in the private sphere, which is a very big specificity of Quebec compared maybe to the rest of Canada, but which, according to me, is a heritage of the French relationship with France, where of course there is this idea that religion is something in the private and should not be public at all. So I think this is the kind of secularization we have in Quebec, like religion in the private sphere. We don't want to hear about it, and not at the level of the political institution, not even at the level of the public institutions, like in the schools. We recently had a big scandal in one school with teachers who had a very conservative education means, and it happened that those teachers were of Maghreb descent. And the whole thing became an issue about religion in school. Well, actually, it was just at the beginning a problem of education philosophy. So this is to which extent the secularization process is far. But as I see in my research, when you talk with people, you see that there is a sensitivity that is in the private sphere. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah.
Okay, Galen.
I was just going to pass it over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, we've got a couple of people in the chat. So David, Fraser, and Catherine. So maybe we'll start with Catherine's question. So Catherine asked to stay off camera, but is asking, are there any differences surfacing by gender, Géraldine? Have you seen any kind of key differences between your male, female, or other gendered response?
We tried not to think, but actually, not so much. That's interesting. Even when I think about obviously the feminist discourse that is really, really strong in Quebec, which is one of the bases of this whole myth of modernity in Quebec. It's not just to reject the Catholic Church, is to save our women from the domination of the Catholic priests who used to come inside the houses and wonder why families were not bigger, and staring at women with this very accusative stare, like, did you prevent families? So there is this idea that modernity in Quebec has really been built to save the women and gave them the power again. But you find this discourse equally among men and women. It is a very internalized discourse that is part of this modernity myth. So I would say that, well, there is this idea in religious studies that women are more open to spiritualities than men, but actually this is not what I have found. We have both, and among the atheists we have a very how can I say, assertive women who said, I'm atheist and that's it, I'll never have children, and there is nothing after life, and so forth and so on. So no, not so many difference between men and women, I'm afraid. Although it's not a factor I have used to analyze the data. I really wanted to have as much men as women, because I think personally that there are a lot of studies on women and not enough on men. So that's why I really wanted to have both.
Okay. And so just a reminder to everyone, if you'd like to ask a question, you can raise your virtual hand or post in the chat. Next, actually the original question I missed, sorry, David, comes from David Fraser, who's asking that David would like to hear more about Jacques' profile. So can you speak a bit more about Jacques?
Yeah, Jacques' profile, what can I say? Yeah, I'll go back to Jacques' profile in my notes. So Jacques' profile is really interesting also because he has this, well, Jacques is a man who, I'm just looking at my note because I was not into that so much. Oh yeah, that's someone who says he's very distant from religion. He's atheist, and he has those very wonderful quotes saying that I have chats with gods. I say he doesn't exist, and he says he exists, and he says he exists, and we don't try to know who's right. So that's really interesting, and so he has this very intellectual profile. Jack is a very intellectual man who values a lot nature, who really whose discourse is really based on a sensitivity to nature. And he would say, we Quebecois, we are very close to nature. Each time we can, we go to do camping. And he would quote a specific experience he had with a wolf. On the road, he met a wolf, and he had this very deep and profound eye contact with this wolf, and this really moved him a lot. But at the same time, he's very strongly in favor of the Quebecois sovereignty, and also he would have this tendency to psychologize anything he experienced, even the possibility of God's existence. He would psychologize and said, okay, when I had this breakup, this very hurtful breakup, I tended to go to the church just to find some relief, but that was just because I needed a relief and I needed a support. So it's very psychologization of his religious sensitivity, because he has one. Of course, he has been socialized in religion. At the same time, he's a very how can I say, in favor and very assertive regarding gender equality, and also the deregulation of sexuality. And he had wonderful quotes also about his parents going to the church when he was a teen, and he at the same time staying home and having his first sex experience, and saying the church has so much control over sexuality. This is what made us Quebecois stay away from the church, because that was too much. So you see those very different forces that make this this atheist profile, but at the same time, there is a sensitivity for something mysterious. This is someone I know very well, and I know as he's aging, he starts to have existential questions, and he's very moved by even the book saying, is there something? So I mean, even the atheists in our data, they have some sensitivity to the mystery and to existential questions that can open and pave the way to something bigger. And of course, regarding laicity, Jacques is someone who has a very strong discourse regarding laicity, with this feeling of being invaded by immigrants who are introducing religion again to Quebecois society. So in this profile, we have persons who would say that immigrants are the ones that are going to make Quebec back in the Grande Mossière period. We took distance from that, but they would say, when we see those Muslim women with the veil, it reminds me of the Catholic nuns, and this is like being backward for us. So there is this feeling of being invaded and endangered by religious migration, which they associate with religion. So that's why this profile is very, very in favor of a very strong laicity model.
Sarah, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, well, I'll take this opportunity to jump in because I have lots of questions. So I'll ask one. Thank you so much, Géraldine. Really fascinating. I mean, the Quebec context is always fascinating and important, and it's great to hear from your data and interviews with baby boomers. So my question is kind of about the life cycle effect that you're capturing with the life story approach. So I know in a lot of sociology of religion, there's a lot of emphasis on the generational effects because they are large, right? The differences between boomers, Gen X, millennials. But here you're able also to capture the kind of the life story, right? The variations within the biography, and you touched on it a few times in your talk. And so I was curious because when I interviewed and ran surveys with millennials, they were at a specific point in their life. They were kind of, in their young adulthood, slowly transitioning to becoming middle-aged adults. So they were thinking a lot about, buying a house or starting to have kids or start a family. But you're interviewing the boomers at a very different period in their lives, right? They're senior citizens or they're becoming senior citizens. And I'm guessing that death and end of life is becoming more prominent in what they're thinking about at that stage. So could you maybe speak a bit more to maybe some of the impact that had on the narrative where they were at, say, compared to if you had interviewed them back in the 60s and 70s when they were having their whole hippie countercultural moment, the kind of impact of interviewing them now? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I started to touch on that when I was describing the profile of Jacques. There are I would say that most of them were retired. Well, no, half of them were retired, but some of them were still in the active life. So that makes a difference. But of course, coming to the one of the last part of their life, there were these existential questions that they started to formulate, but also the question of what did they transmit to the next generation. That was very interesting too, because for the profile of Jean, which I have described in depth, he said at the end of his interview that he decided to leave his children free to choose their own religious identity or sensitivity, and now he regrets that. He regrets not having transmitted some of this religious heritage, and this is a hint on what this specific period when we interviewed them can do on the interviews, because at an earlier age, those baby boomers decided not to transmit religion because they were really critical of religion. But coming to the end of their life, they have a more nuanced discourse on religion, and especially on Catholic heritage, showing that and recognizing what Catholicism has brought to Quebec. So this is why the discourse is more nuanced and ambivalent, because there is a very high critical discourse, but at the same time, there is this recognition that at least we had Catholicism to give us some values, some opening of mind, which, according to them, distinguish them from immigrants. So we have this opening of mind that allows us to go towards other religious resources out of curiosity, not to abide by them or adhere, but at least we are curious, and a lot of them are curious. Actually, they are not opposed to. Even Jack, who is a very strong atheist, he's curious. And he said in his narrative that at one point he was going out with a Muslim woman and he found this woman beautiful in her piety. But of course, he stays atheist. So I think that the point of their life when we interview them make them more nuanced regarding the religious heritage in their life, but in the whole society. This is, of course, also informed by the whole debates that the province is experiencing regarding the definition of their own identity, because as they see immigrants asking for some accommodation regarding their religious practices, Quebecois people are led to question themselves about their own relationship regarding their religion and what is their identity at the end of the day. So this makes very nuanced a discourse.
Okay, thanks, Géraldine. Jen Selby actually has a follow-up question, and she apologizes she can't ask because her audio isn't working. So I'll ask Jen's question. I'll try and summarize it because a lot of it is what you just talked about, Géraldine. But Jen's kind of asking specifically about, across your interviewees, did you see more of a trend of returning as they aged to, what originally was a Catholic socialization when they were kids? So more return as they get older, or are they kind of leaning more and adapting to what they're seeing amongst younger generations? So you talked about diversification of immigration, especially amongst younger people in Quebec, or also maybe rising non-religion amongst younger folks. So did you see more kind of leaning back or leaning forward amongst your people?
No, yeah, it's not as polarized. I would say that as they come to age, they start to wonder more. So they have those existential questions that make them wonder more, with maybe some openness to spirituality or otherness, other experiences. But I won't say that they come back to what they have been educated in. They kind of rework it, renegotiate. Even the profile of the revert that we have, he has not come back to the preconciliar Catholicism. He actually was into Focolari movement or into new communities movement. So other kind of religious sensitivity than the one he was raised in. So they would rework their socialization, their religious socialization, and as one respondent say, take what suit them and leave what doesn't. So, for example, we have one person who experienced a cancer during her life, and she was very atheist. She's the person whom I identify as the agnostic. Because until she got the cancer, she was very, very distanced from religion. But then she got the cancer, and she could not be biomedicine could help her, but not enough. And she decided to put all the good resources she could have in her hand. So she started to go to oh my God, First Nations rituals, but I don't know how you say in English. Loge de sudation, etc.
Sweat lodges. Sweat lodge.
Sweat lodges. Yeah. Sweat lodges rituals with a friend who invited her, and then her husband gave her a medal from Saint Michel medal, who is known to fight for and protect. So she said, "Okay, I didn't believe in it, but anyway, I would take it. It cannot do harm." So you see how the specific challenges of life can still revive some sensitivity to religion.
Okay. And Matali had a question. Matali, do you want to jump in and ask it?
Yeah, I had a question about, I'm just going to read word for word. whether you explored or you believe your research has touched on secular individuals, or in your case, boomers in Quebec who've unconsciously, used religious schemas to inform their moral decision making.
I'm not sure I got the question. Do the baby boomers I met use religious schemes to inform moral decision making? Is that the
Yeah,
question?
yeah, exactly. If they end up justifying their morality by sort of using a religious framework, um,
Yeah,
even if
question.
they don't necessarily identify as religious. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the people who would do that are more the agnostic and humanist persons who would say that their decision making, as you say, are based on values that are not Catholic in particular, that are universal values. So among those people, there is this idea that there are um, transversal values that are common to all religions, and this is what they abide by. So this is the profile that is more prone to inform their decision according to their morality. But this is not really a question that we asked. What kind of decision are you thinking of?
I was more thinking in terms of morality because I know, morality and religion, they're quite closely tied together. Um, and just wondering if people who don't identify as religious end up, unconsciously kind of going back to their religious roots, um, to find some sort of understanding, when making a decision, which causes them, some internal, uh, there's some internal complexity. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's more the humanist respondents who who tend to act this way by relying on common values that they would say are humanist and universal in some way. So with their own definition of humanism, of course.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe for our last question, David Seljak, did you want to jump in and ask yours?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for a very nice presentation, Géraldine. I was curious, in Europe, one finds politicians who themselves are not particularly religious practitioners or believers, and yet they refer to the Christian heritage or the Christian nature of their society, their Christian civilization, in order to protect and promote a particular kind of nationalism that pushes away influence from immigrants, which is to say, Muslims. So I know one finds that sometimes among Quebec politicians, but in your interviews, did you find that sentiment at all among Quebec baby boomers?
Yeah, well, you brought a very hot topic about to which extent is a society based on Catholicism, and to which extent this fact is used in order to revert immigrants. Is that the questions? The question you asked?
Yeah, that in the same way that in Europe, the insistence that this is a Christian civilization in this country is a way of
Yeah.
of containing Muslims, of othering Muslim populations. And you find sometimes this in political discourse in Quebec, but I wonder if it's a popular sentiment.
No, I have more found that Catholicism is more a heritage, but it's not the structure of our society. It's more our heritage. Well, I know it's the line between those two ideas is very thin, but it is existent though. I mean, those people I met see Quebec society as a very secular one that has to be governed around on the basis of like rules. So this is how they see their society. But as far as their identity is concerned, they feel they have a Catholic heritage, but this is not very assumed. This is why they build the differences between the way the society is framed and work and their sensitivity, because their Catholic, the Catholic impact on Quebecois society is not really assumed in virtue of this collective myth around which Quebecois modernity has been built by rejecting Catholicism. So we are no more Catholic, but we have this sensitivity because this is part of a family story. This is part of, this is a very interesting question because the other day, my hairdresser, who is a baby boomer, told me, well, I heard on the radio today that we're not even allowed to say that the end of the year celebrations are for Christmas. You see, that's what immigrants do. We are not even allowed to talk about Christmas in our own society, but this is our collective heritage. We have Christmas. Why can't we talk about it in the radio? Because that's what she heard. We cannot talk about Christmas in radio as the end of the year celebrations. It's just the end of the year celebration, and it has to be current to all. So we can't specify Christmas. So she was very critical of that, and she felt hurt. But on the other hand, for her, Quebecois society is secular and it has to be ruled around like rules. So she doesn't make the link.
Right. Yeah, very interesting.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And particularly thank you, Géraldine. We're going to close it off, but I think our director, Sarah, has one last announcement. So just 2 seconds. We're going to announce the next event.
Yeah, thanks so much, Géraldine. Yeah, so our next IRCSF event is in partnership with St. Jerome's. We've got Gary Adler actually coming and visiting St. Jerome's University on the 27th of February in the evening. And he's going to talk about his kind of specialty research into Catholics and the role in more politically polarized societies as well as in plural societies. So please do join us for that. I've put the details in the chat. It's on Thursday, the 27th, starting at 7:30 Eastern. Now you can attend in person if you're in the Waterloo region. It's free, or you can live stream the event for free, or it'll be recorded and it'll be available after the fact also for free. Okay, so thanks again, Géraldine. Galen, I'll let you wrap up.
Thanks, everyone. Take care,
Thank
and we'll
you.
hope to see you in February.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye.